Good morning, and welcome to the Boulder Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship on this, our second fully outdoors service. We appreciate your grace and the sharing of your frustrations as we continue to do the COVID dance between our deep yearning to be together and our similarly deep yearning for safety and inclusion. I am Larry Laverdure, or as the French would say, La Verdure, but everybody thinks I'm being pretentious when I say that. Your service leader today, and I'm joined by Service Associate David BVUUF, also a Frenchman. Our music director, Tad Koreth, is here, along with Clara Kelly and Petra Mensch, leading songs, and our AV tech team, Eric Williams, Deborah Mensch, and Mary Stackpole, with help from Barbara Sterling and David BVUUF. Believe me, it's a lot of work doing this. So they deserve all of your congratulations. We are attempting another pivot in services, this time in the direction of gathering together and in person. And we hope to be able to stick with this approach for as long as the weather holds. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think it has something to do with cold hands. Or as long as Boulder County doesn't slip into the severe risk status on the COVID Act Now protocol. We are also testing CO2 levels in the building so we know how many people can return indoors safely based on the science. So fingers crossed, we'll be able to keep meeting in this multi-platform way for the foreseeable future. Apparently we can't see too far out. There is a flurry of activity on Sunday mornings, as I mentioned, and to get us ready for these services, and many hands are needed. For much of the last few months, even on Zoom meetings, we've had the same dedicated team, and they too share their experience and have some of their own time off to enjoy services. If you are interested in being part of that, please see Deborah Mensch, our AV team leader extraordinaire, currently kneeling, praying that you will come up and talk to her later on. We have lots of people here on the playground, approximately, where's Frank? Frank, how many people we got? Frank says it's a goodly number, so that must be 40? Yeah, we'll go with 40. All right, 40's good. And I've lost my place. Oh, there we go. And on Zoom this morning, 47. Okay. And we're together again, right? I don't think there's anybody in the cars, but if you are in the cars, use 97.5 FM. You can join Zoom if you feel free. Probably get better audio by radio, but feel free to experiment. When it gets colder, you might think staying in the cars might be better. And people up here will probably have a muck-a-luck and a few other things on. Okay. If you're joining us by Zoom today, I invite you to shift into gallery mode if you haven't already, and scroll through the screens so you can experience the lovely diversity of this congregation, because without it and without you, there would be no us. Those of you in person today, take a moment to take a look around and see who's here. Okay, this is not a social hour. Oh boy. UUs. Never give them a chance to disagree. You are all welcomed here today. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, skin tones, shapes, and sizes that come together in your uniqueness, you are welcomed here today. In the beauty that is you, who you love and how you love, you are welcome here. Whether you are joining us on Zoom or here among the playground wood chips, you are welcomed here. Christian, pagan, humanist, Jew, Buddhist, mystic, Muslim, even UUs, with all of the traditions that inform your spiritual life, you are welcome here today. No matter how long you are away, nor how soon before you return, you are welcome here. Whether you come with laughter in your heart, or tears, or both, you are welcome here. You are invited to join us with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. We welcome you today. As UUs, we acknowledge that our community is located on the lands once stewarded by the Arapaho, the Ute, Lakota, and Cheyenne people. This congregation honors Indigenous legacy and respects the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands through our connection through Right Relation Boulder. We also acknowledge we live in a time when Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and Hispanic people are devalued, violated, and killed because of systemic racism. Boulder Valley commits itself to becoming anti-racist and defeats systemic racism by taking action to dismantle racism in society, taking guidance from and while honoring the lived experiences of those who identify as people of color, and developing personal relationships between cultures. If you are new here, we are glad you found us and hope that no matter where you are right now, you can experience the warmth and love of this congregation. Each Sunday is different here, so please come back a few times to really get to know us. If you want to get better connected, please visit our website at bvuuf.org. If you are on Zoom, you can see in the chat window, there is a link for the First Times Visitors page. Or email your information to our office manager, Carol, at officemanager@bvuuf.org. Her email address will be in the chat window as well. Finally, if any new visitors on Zoom would like to introduce yourself in the chat, please do. And if there are any newcomers here in person who would like to introduce yourself, please just raise your hand or stand up and do so. We love to know who is here among us. Following the service, we'll have announcements, virtual coffee hour, and time for those of you who are here to socialize. And now we will light our chalice. If you are joining us via Zoom, I invite you to now light your chalice as David lights the fellowship chalice. So we know where all our chalices are, please write in the chat, chalice lit in, and the name of your town. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. I now invite you to let the sound of the second bowl draw you deeper into the present moment in the company of this multi-generational, multi-platform gathered community.
Opening words come this morning from Friar Gregory Boyle. The word is kinship. How can we achieve a certain kind of compassion that stands in awe of what the poor have to carry rather than stand in judgment of how they carry it? For the measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. That's what we want to achieve. This sense of mutuality, where we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we are separate. No us and them, just us. For there's an idea that's taken root in the world. It's at the root of all that's wrong with it. And that idea would be this: that there just might be lives out there that matter less than others. How do we stand against that idea?
We're going to sing for you now a song that if you've been attending our services for even a brief amount of time, you're probably familiar with. This is Turn the World Around. It was written by Harry Belafonte, or rather, it was taught to him. I don't have his exact words in front of me, but he tells a story about how he learned this song. He was in the African country of Guinea, and he was speaking with a storyteller and who told him the story of the elements of the earth, the fire, the water, the wind, the rain, and how it takes each of those elements to turn the world around. They each have different characteristics. They each have different personalities. They each have different roles. Without any of them, the earth wouldn't turn. So obviously the idea is that we look at ourselves in the same way, that it takes each of our talents and gifts to contribute to the whole. So we're going to sing Turn the World Around in the right key.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around.
Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life.
Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? I know who you are?
See we one another clearly, do we know who we are? Oh, so is life a patiwa. So is life. Oh, so is life a patiwa. So is life.
Water make the river, river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain. Spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world around. Oh, so is life a patiwa. Ha, so is life. Whoa, so is life a patiwa. Ha, so is life. Whoa, so is life a patiwa. Ha, so is life. Whoa, so is life a patiwa. Ha, so is life.
I grew up in a middle-class family in the 1950s and 60s in what was then the 100% white town of Billings, Montana. My father was an independent landman in the oil and gas industry, driving many tens of thousands of miles per year to provide for his family. Mom was a housewife, and my older brother and I grew up well-fed and well-supported, ensconced in assumed white privilege and an unspoken but understood list of assumptions, biases, and prejudice toward Black, Indigenous, and all people of color. In particular, 14 federally recognized sovereign indigenous nations living on 7 different reservations in a gigantic semicircle around the state of Montana. The story I was given as a boy about our neighbors, the Absaroka people, on the Crow Reservation immediately to the east of Billings, was that of the drunken Indian, and also a heroic version of Custer's Last Stand. This was the sum of the singular story I was told about American Indians as a young boy. I had no education concerning an entire category of indigenous people for whom everything is infused with spirit. People who look at the natural world around us as a direct relative. Earth as a sacred being. Soil, stones, trees, lakes, streams, mountains, as kin, as family, something American Indian communities have done for thousands of years. These are religious concepts to these communities and peoples. They're not theories, they're facts, as important and moving as any external realities. The story I was taught was that soil was just dirt, and the stones, they're just rocks. This is the danger of a single story. I knew deep down the story I'd been told wasn't true, and at the same time, I went along with it. What if we as white people could look on the natural world as family, as kin? Wouldn't such an attitude have a direct influence on the choices and practices we make as to how we get our food and how we live our lives? We're in the grip of an enormous changes in our climate and the horrific impacts of our greed on our earth as the momentum of catastrophe increases every day. So how do we begin a news story? And what can we do? My experience is that such changes always begin with the individual, with us. We have a land acknowledgement in Lafayette, a circle of 8 sitting stones in a grove of trees on a trail between the Great Bark Dog Park on North 119th, where you can park, and the entrance to Rothman Open Space. There's a sign near the circle of the stones at the land acknowledgement that's been put up by our city that says in part, "This place serves as an expression of gratitude and appreciation to the indigenous peoples on whose territory we live and work, and as a desired effort to build new relationships." I invite you to take time out of your busy day and go there. Sit a spell. Take in this special place to observe, reflect, and learn. Indigenous Peoples Day is October 9th through the 11th, sponsored by our friends, Right Relationship Boulder. All events are online this year and free. And this year, we have the opportunity to learn about the culture of the Arapaho people through storytelling, Arapaho history and language, games, a cooking class, and a slide presentation and discussion with Arapaho leaders Monday evening, October 11th, about Boulder's Fort Chambers history and its connection to the Sand Creek Massacre. Google Indigenous Peoples Day Boulder 2021. My brothers and sisters, we need a new story before it's too late. And a culture of peoples that have existed on this continent for so many thousands of years is worth listening to. Please take these opportunities to get a glimpse into a different culture so we might reflect more wisely on our own.
Singing these days. I hope you are too. We're going to sing another fan favorite, "We Would Be One," and this really speaks to exactly what David was just talking about. Observing, listening, learning. This hymn asks us. The line is to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. And I think oftentimes that understanding we're not necessarily seeking to acquire new knowledge, but we're seeking to undo those things that we think are true that aren't, those things that keep us separate from one another. Feel free to hum along with this one if you want to. It's to the tune of Finlandia by Sibelius, which you probably know. We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. service with love and joy.
Each week, we remind ourselves of the abundance of our lives and this community by giving half of our plate away to those organizations that share our values. This week, we are sharing our plate with the Boulder County Sanctuary Coalition. The fellowship has supported the coalition since its creation in 2017. The coalition has provided support, financial, legal, emotional, for Ingrid Encalada Latorre, since she chose to live in sanctuary for the benefit of her children, Bryant, Anibal, and Elizabeth. October 17th marks 4 years since Ingrid decided to seek sanctuary, and she has resided at the UU Church in Boulder since late 2017. UUCB and the many faith organizations in the coalition will continue to support Ingrid as she pursues legal steps to enable her and her family to leave sanctuary. Today's half plate will support food for the family for 1 month. With increasing food prices to feed 3 active children, contributions are especially meaningful today. Thank you for your support. If you are on Zoom this morning, the text to donate number will be on your screen. If you are in person today, look for our hospitality folks moving among you with the text to donate number. As our music reflection begins, we invite you to reflect upon the moments in your life when you became aware of a single story you possessed that made an encounter with someone awkward by objectifying them. If you are on Zoom, we invite you to share your answer in the chat window.
Thank you, Tad. One of my favorite songs. Satie's Gymnopedia #1. For the work of this fellowship, bringing love, reason, compassion, and justice to this world, through the work of the Boulder County Sanctuary Coalition, we dedicate our offerings. Good morning again. Let me congratulate you all for the grace and fortitude you have shown throughout this global pandemic. It can be a real struggle at times, and my partner Ellen and I are showing signs of pandemic fatigue, and I'm guessing some of you are as well. So recently, I got a world map and I taped it to the wall, and I gave Ellen a dart and I said, honey, throw it at the map, and wherever it lands, that's where we're going for a 2-week vacation when this is over. So as it turns out, we'll be spending 2 luxurious weeks behind the refrigerator. I can hardly wait. The thing about kinship is we all share the same jokes, the same stories. We see the same movies, celebrate the same holidays, and have the same cultural history with both its triumphs and its failings, which we walk around with, and they act like tinted glasses that color our world so that some things stand out more than others, and some important things we really don't see at all. So as we sang in Turn the World Around, we have to ask, do we know who we are? Do we see each other clearly? And if anything has been made clear by this pandemic, it is that, at least at the political level, the answer to those questions is an unqualified no. No, we don't. My dad was fond of aphorisms, and lately one of them keeps popping up for me as I ponder the ongoing drama of Americans trying to relate to each other in our partisan divided nation. Dad, with his MA degree in history, would proclaim, arguments wouldn't last long if the truth were only on one side. Well, consider the argument between the South and the North over slavery and racism. It's been 400 years, and we're still at it. I'm almost done reading Heather Cox Richardson's book, How the South Won the Civil War. That might not jive with some of your remembrances. And it's such a tangled story of greed and power that today's struggles come into crystal clear focus. I highly recommend the book. And while I discern a kernel of wisdom in my dad's saying, I suspect that it's complicated by just what truth is. Here's a quote from an article by Kirsten Weir on the American Psychological Association's website titled, Why We Believe Alternative Facts. Quote, the natural tendency to cherry pick and twist the facts to fit our existing beliefs is known as motivated reasoning, and we all do it. Motivated reasoning is a pervasive tendency of human cognition, says Peter Dito, PhD, a social psychologist at the University of California, Irvine, who studies how motivation emotion, and intuition influence judgment. Quote again from Peter, people are capable of being thoughtful and rational, but our wishes, hopes, fears, and motivations often tip the scale to make us more likely to accept something as true if it supports what we want to believe. Pretty scary stuff. This tendency to hear what we want to hear and disregard the rest can be broken down into several types of biases. Number one is the negative bias, and it's our tendency to give more weight to negative information and experiences than positive ones. The news adage, if it bleeds, it leads, pretty much sums this one up. Anchoring bias. An anchoring bias is the tendency to be overly influenced by the first piece of information that we hear. Familiarity bias. Simply put, this is your brain's tendency to give greater credence to conversations and information from people who look like you, dress like you, and are in a similar socioeconomic and cultural bracket as you. Number four, recency bias. Imagine you're listening to a public debate and you give great weight to the info presented. You'll give greater weight to the info presented at the end of the debate than at the beginning. I think for older folks, it's just because you forgot what they said in the beginning. Self-serving bias. The self-serving bias is the tendency for people to give themselves credit for their successes and blame others for their failures. And number six, confirmation bias. This is the tendency to listen more often to data that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. People who only get their news from MSNBC or Fox News. The collective result of these natural biases can lead to having a sense of knowing what's going on without actually paying attention. I'll say that one again. You get a sense of knowing what's going on without actually paying attention. That's when you know a single story is working. You're flying on automatic pilot. Ever happened to you? You're going somewhere, right? But you end up not going there because you're going someplace that you always go, right? On automatic pilot, right? Usually I figured it out before I get there, though. So being naive in a novel situation such that one's intent is undermined by one's unconscious bias can often lead to wounded feelings. This is the danger of having a single story. Still, if you own your embarrassment, your pain, you are on the path to wisdom. Dr. Rachel Naomi Riemann points out this paradox. Quote, wounding and healing are not opposites. They are part of the same thing. It is our wounds that enable us to be compassionate with the wounds of others. It is our limitations that make us kind to the limitations of other people. It is our loneliness that helps us to find other people or to even know they are alone with an illness. I think I have served people perfectly with parts of myself I used to be ashamed of. End quote. But I going to say that last bit again. I think I have served people perfectly with parts of myself I used to be ashamed of. This is a prose poem I wrote about my first encounter with having a single story about charity. It's called Uncle Leo and the Pencil Man. The day I got to ride in Uncle Leo's Oldsmobile was special. It had a clean smell, and the seats were soft. He drove it slow and carefully because he was crippled. It had special hand tools to let him brake and go. His arms were strong because he used them to work his wheelchair. But he still needed help getting in and out of the car. And when Dad got out to do some shopping, he said, "Hey, sport, come join me up front." Well, the dashboard was shiny and had a radio. We talked about my Little League team and Ted Williams. That's when I noticed a man sitting on the sidewalk on some blankets. The bottom of his pant legs were tied in knots. I'd never seen a man without legs. People going into the store dropped coins in a can. He thanked them and offered them something, but they just kept walking. I turned to my uncle and I said, "Do you have a quarter?" He knew why I had asked, and gave me a whole dollar bill. I clutched the bill in my hand as not to lose it. I walked over to the man and I said, "This is for you." And he took the bill from my hand and said, "Would you like a pencil?" I hadn't considered that this was a give and take, and said, "No, thank you. I have lots of pencils." "Well, you could give it to a friend," he offered. Well, this took me by surprise, and I tried to deal with my confusion. "No," I found myself saying, "you need them so other people will help you." I turned and walked back to Uncle Leo's car and noticed that I gave him a sheepish grin as I climbed back in, like I had fumbled a pop-up. He looked me in the eye and he said, "You got a good heart. I'm proud of you." My Uncle Leo's dead now. I never saw the pencil man again. But I often wish I had taken the pencil he had offered, because I know now it would have made him happy to be able to give something back. But I was too young to know then that we were kin. To tell the truth, I was embarrassed that morning, but I didn't know why. But ever since then, when I'm involved in a similar situation, I always allow the recipient of my largesse to have the dignity to reciprocate in whatever way they choose, because we're all in this together. No us and them, just us. Stories are what hold the culture together, and anything that impacts the stories we tell impacts the flavor of our community. Americans continue to suffer a collective trauma, and the confirmed depth of that trauma has recently passed the 700,000 dead, and untold others frightened, disabled, jobless, evicted, isolated, mourning, and distraught in the ever-changing tide of information and disinformation abroad in our cyberspaces. Even the efforts to prevent and cure the virus have been politicized by the enduring American paradox between diversity and equality, between democracy and oligarchy. In a recent podcast, Brené Brown and her guest psychotherapist, Esther Perel, speak to the issues that the pandemic presents for relationships. The title of the piece is Partnerships, Patterns, and Paradoxical Relationships. What stood out for me was how Esther compared the pandemic's impact on relationships with the impact that the Holocaust had on Jewish communities, especially on the stories they told, and how some refused to tell that story. Which reminded me of how my uncles Leo and Francis never spoke of the trauma of World War II, despite the crippling wound Leo received. Esther shared that the silence of those traumatized was to protect their families from the horrors they had experienced, the shame they felt for what they were forced to do to survive. They explored comparative suffering, which blocks people from sharing and owning their pain because others have suffered so much more than them. We don't have time for all the rich information in this podcast, but I highly recommend it, and the link is going into the chat and was included in the Connection weekly announcements, which you received Friday. I will end with two quotes which seem to be most apt for the times we live in now. The first is by Henri Nouwen, another Frenchman. Nobody escapes being wounded. We're all wounded people, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. The main question is not how can we hide from our wounds so we don't have to be embarrassed, but rather, how can we put our woundedness in the service of others? And the second is by Martin Luther King Jr. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree today. May we be open to the many struggling with their single stories, and may we plant many apple trees today. Now I invite us into our time of community connection, our time of sacred sharing. If you are on Zoom and you would like to share a joy or concern, please type into the chat window, sending it to everyone, and let us know briefly what is in your heart today. I will read out loud what you share. If you would like us to be able to follow up with you, please include your full name and where you live in your chat. David will put a stone in our sacred waters on your behalf. If you are here in person, please come forward and place a stone in the sacred water and speak briefly into the microphone your joy or concern. Blessed ones, I share with you a poem by John O'Donohue entitled The Notch. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, May a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the currach of thought, and the stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life.
Thank you. This is called Connected, and you may recognize it. This was the song that Deborah and Laura Patterson used to make their fabulous virtual choir video. And if you remember that, there were folks rolling a ball back and forth between each other in front of the building, and there are lots of people that participated in that one. I hope you see it. If you haven't seen it, you should figure out a way to get it out there again. Connected by Brian Tate. You are me. That's what I said. I am. You are me. Don't you see? I am. You are me. That's what I said. I am. You are me. Don't you see? I am. You are me. That's what I said. I am. You are me. Don't you see?
Seems like I'm over here.
And
you're over there.
That's what I said.
Something between us that's
me.
greater than air.
Don't you
It
see?
seems like
I
I'm over
am.
here.
You are
and
me.
you're over there.
That's what I
But
said.
there's
I
something
am.
between
You
us
are
that's
me.
greater than air.
Don't you
It
see?
seems like
I
I'm over
am.
here.
You are
And
me.
you're over there.
That's
but
what I said.
there's
It's just
something
an
between us
are
that's
me.
greater than
Don't
air.
you
It
see?
seems like
I
I'm over
am.
here.
You are
And
me.
you're over there.
That's
but
what I
there
said.
is
I
something
am.
between
You
us
are
that's
me.
greater than
Don't
air.
you
It
see?
seems like I'm
I
over
am
here.
facts of atomic
It seems like I'm over here. And
you
you're over
are
there.
me.
It's just an
It's a fact subatomic.
It seems like I am a part of you. You are a part of me. And so together we are one body. I am inside your head. You are inside my heart. We fit together, perfect from the start.
I am, you are me. That's what I said. I am, you are me. Don't you
It
see?
seems like
I
I'm over
am,
here.
you
and
are me.
you're over there.
That's what
but
I said.
there's
I
something
am,
between
you
us
are
that's
me.
greater than
Don't
air.
you
It
see?
seems like
I
over
am,
here.
you are
and
me.
you're over there.
That's what
but
I
there
said.
is
I
something
am,
between
you
us
are
that's
me.
greater than air.
Don't you
It
see?
seems like over
I
here.
am,
and you're over
you
there. but
are
there
me.
is
It's just
something
an
It's a fact subatomically.
It seems like over
I
here.
am,
and
you
you're over
you
there. but
are
there
me.
is
It's just
something
an
It's a fact
subatomically. It
subatomically.
seems like I am a part of you. You are a part of me. And so together we are one body. I am inside your head. You are inside my heart. We fit together, perfect from the start.
I am a part of you, you are a part of me, and so together we are one
You are inside my heart. We fit together, perfect from the start. I am a part of you. You are a part of me. And so together we are one body. I am inside your head. You are inside my heart. We fit together, perfect from the start.
So join me in saying the words to extinguish the chalice. We extinguish the chalice, but not the warmth of the light of truth, nor the energy of action. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. And as promised, here are our announcements. Upcoming events, and I suppose there are some breakout rooms today for the folks online. Reverend Lydia's class, there is still time to sign up. The class is living in these difficult times. And there seems to be a part of my announcements that are missing. Uh-oh. Oh, anyway, I believe this is the last day meeting of Lydia's group for the last session of that three-part class. But this Thursday night, the online version starts up. So if you want to join up, that would be fine. Clarify COVID for now. Okay, so basically, outside while the weather holds, CO2 testing in the sanctuary with people, CO2 testing indoors with the choir. Any quick shift will require a pivot to only Zoom. So we're still in a tenuous space here. This could be due to weather. Could happen if Boulder County COVID status goes to severe, or we could have some technical issues, all of which could put us back onto Zoom only. So if you're the kind of person that prays, you might want to pray that that doesn't happen. Julie McKenzie needs 3 to 5 people to help for 1 to 2 hours on Monday between 11 and 3, or Tuesday between 11 and 5, or Wednesday between noon and 3. You're all going to go pick up about 40 chairs someplace in Boulder. And there's already, David, you're going to be driving, right? A truck. So get a hold of Julie. Is Julie here? Ah, there you are. All right, so if you're here, talk to Julie. If you can help out, and other folks, you can reach her online. We have a team working on how to reserve limited seats for in-person services once we are able to have them. Services will still be broadcast on Zoom, but if you would like to be able to make reservations to come in person, please make sure you are on our constant contact email list. That's the list we use to publicize the reservation process. If you regularly receive Connection Weekly by email, then you're on the list. If not, please go to the link now being placed in the chat, bvuuf.org/connection, and click Sign Up Now to get on the list. We realize a few of our members don't use email or Zoom. How droll. But might very much want to come to services in person. If you know such a member, please help us make sure we can include them by sending their name and phone number, if you have it, to Ann Brigden at the email now going into the chat. If you're here in person, you can get this email address from Deborah Mensch after the service. Deborah, over there. Okay. And I do believe we're done.